All right, so we're back with part two, guys, after that brilliant presentation Rachel gave us in part one. I wanted to sort of dive into a lot of it because she touched on so many aspects of everything that's been coming out now in the Epstein files, right? But, I mean, where do you even want to start? ASIO and the connection. You spoke about your dad working there, and I think the deathbed confession that you spoke about as well. How do you kind of see ASIO? Because some people, talk about the MI6, Mossad, the CIA, but I think is it understated sometimes that ASIO has a pretty deep connection to all this stuff, or do you see them as lower than other people? And some people talk about Pine Gap being a really important base,
Yeah.
but how do you see all that?
I think Australia is extremely important in the MK Ultra mind control stakes. So if you look at two of the main tools for mind control are Wizard of Oz programming and Alice in Wonderland. Now, Oz is Australia, Alice Springs. So I think Australia's population has been kept reasonably small. It's a huge continent,
Hmm.
but we have a very small population for a reason. And the White Australia policy was intense. Like nobody was allowed in for such a long time. Obviously, that's changed now. I think they did that because it was easier to keep the population stupid, numbed, dumbed down, plenty of fluoride in the water. You know, there's a lot going on here, a lot going on.
Yeah, I kind of talk about it as almost like wiping the slate clean. You get to start a country from scratch the way they did. And I think they've lied about a lot of our history. And I just recorded an episode about other cultures that were here before and all that type of thing. But as you say, people don't like to hear this that we're one of the countries with the highest percentage and lots of fluoride propaganda, the schooling system, a lot of the culture that's been kind of washed of like true spirituality and that type of thing, and the religious establishments that have become so corrupted. And so a lot of people just kind of see this as normal because it's all they know. But then when they do go on holidays to these other places that have a lot of rich culture or spirituality, it's almost like going to another planet for them. For people that have just grown up in that sort of middle to lower class version of Australia with a very narrow view of how the world works and trust the news and all that type of thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And the first thing you'll hear when you put on the news is a journalist speaking to you like you're an idiot, because that's how the way they speak, because they use special intonation, because it's a kind of mind control and they do it constantly, and I cannot stand it. And it's this standard way of speaking to people. There's nothing genuine about it. Every time I listen to a presenter on Australian news, I want to scream. It makes me so angry
Yeah.
because I know exactly what they're doing.
It's so funny you say that. I used to, if I was ever watching mainstream TV, I'd often like have to leave the room and just be thinking like, I feel like I'm getting done, but I can't stand this compared to how interesting it is watching good docos and going down rabbit holes. And now that you more you learn about not just the what they're saying, it's actually some even that people say like the music and the lighting and these new TVs, the wavelengths, and that's all kind of adding to this version of how they can really get you in this certain state and television programming. Like it's all there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I,
Right.
obviously I have personal experience from being used in the worst kind of way in a major, television station. So I mean, for heaven's sake, there's a children's programming tool where people wear different coloured tops, and I won't name who it is exactly, but they've got someone coming out now who's supposed to be a tree, but is throwing up the 666, both hands, and looks like Pan or the Green Man. I mean, I'm a big advocate for nature spirits because I know they're trying to show us a lot at the moment. So I work as a psychic. I was trained in MK Ultra Theta psychic programming from infancy, and I use that now against the those who think they're in control, who are basically toddlers. They can't share, and they haven't grown from about 2 or 3 years old. It's all about me, me, me. I need to get all the attention, and I need to have everything, and I can't share with anybody. And that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with people who are in a child part, but who are in a position of very powerful position.
Yeah, and again, once you wake up to all this, when you're trying to wake your friends up to it, sometimes it feels like you are kind of dealing with children, and
Yeah.
in that sense as well. Yeah, that's wild to think about, right? with the programming, you spoke about how you were kind of like a memory asset, and Annika has spoken about, like the sex slave and the blackmail. Um, we touched on Operation Matchbox with these experiments. So, where do you think a lot of this stuff was happening or is happening? Is it like underground military, or is it just in these hospitals in certain, cordoned off areas, or like where was a lot of this taking place?
I mean, I was used in a facility, so I had weapons training. I didn't like the rifles because they were too loud. I had super sharp hearing as a teenager when I was in my early teens when they were doing the weapons training. So they did bow and arrow training. I then split a broomstick in PE class in high school, and from a distance of about 3 or 4 meters, and people were just like, "Oh my god, what happened there?" The facility, so there's the facilities, there's all the program that goes through all the universities, the mainstream media, all of that. So and the academia, it's across the board. And the only people who get into those high positions are usually from a bloodline family. So there are 13 main bloodline families, but there's all these different adjuncts. So I'm a McIntyre. That was my father's surname. My father married into the Wright family. Wright and McIntyre. Wright means Mason. McIntyre means son of a Mason. So it goes back to the Kennedy line. So I'm descended from a Catherine Kennedy. So the people in my family were always groomed for certain positions. As I said in the first presentation, one of my first cousin, Martin Hamilton Smith, was head of the Liberal Party, defected to the Labor Party at one point. Lots of academics in my family. And, my sister, who was unalived in 2009, had 3 degrees. And I love Claire, and she's an intelligent woman, but she was so dissociated, I don't know that she actually ever earned any of them. So when you're in one of these bloodline families, you get given things. So I was given access to a Bachelor of Science degree. I've proven that. I've published my transcripts, and I had no reason to be put into a science degree. I didn't have enough points. I had never done any science subjects in the last 2 years of my high schooling, never looked at physics. My father made a phone call and I got in. And it's interesting, he was very friendly with Flinders University. One particular individual was a relative of one individual that I've shown a photograph in the first conversation we had. So there are also underground facilities. It's across the board. So unless you've been trained, you don't get into a position of power. So I don't want to say that all our politicians are like that. Obviously, I had 4 good politicians stand up and meet with me and try and help me. One was very, very successful, but then my father died. So it was unfortunately, not particularly useful, because he was gone then, and I couldn't go any further with it. What's really interesting about the Pine Gap information, that's near to Alice Springs, it's actually in the crossing point of 2 dragon lines, which is the most powerful of all ley lines. People don't understand this because supposedly ley lines are just a myth. You can see them. We've got cryptochrome photoreceptors, just like birds and insects. We can actually see ley lines, and that's one of the things that I teach in my courses, is how to see a ley line. If we know where they are, we can put positive energy and frequencies into those spaces, because the family spend a lot of time putting facilities. CERN in France would be in one of the most powerful crossing points to change the frequency, to bring it to a negative frequency.
Yeah.
So most people know about 432 hertz being a very beneficial frequency for the body. 440 hertz, which most pop music and mainstream music is not good for the body. If you look at cymatics, it's a completely different frequency.
Yeah.
So they put those facilities in those locations for a reason. You'll see these arenas in the same sort of positions. So as far as, for instance, the Stranger Things series is actually just all disclosure. I just can't believe that, particularly the last one that's only just come out. I can't believe how much of that is actually what my life was like.
Yeah.
It's just incredible, which to me says either they're putting it out there to make anybody who says that they had an experience like that, they must have just seen it in the series. So they're just either that, or they're actually showing us what's done.
Yeah. A lot of this is out, though, now in official declassified documents, right? Even stuff that ley lines, or you speak about psychic abilities, but all this stuff about consciousness that was declassified, where they're teaching people to do remote viewing, astral projection, and again, this energetic component that you talk about, I think a lot of that stuff that people view as woo woo, once they hear about how evil these people are and all these kind of rituals that they do and who they worship, then people tend to think, well, there must be some sort of opposite that's true in terms of positive and our consciousness and spirituality and that type of thing. So, how do you see all that?
If ever I see anything in the mainstream that's trying really hard to debunk something or call it conspiracy theory, that's my first thing. I'll go for it and have a check it out, because obviously there's truth in it, there's integrity in it, there's something really important in there to learn. And I think that's what most people are doing now. I think we've hit that critical mass where people are looking at it and saying, if it's in the mainstream, it's probably not true. If they're saying it's wrong, it's probably right. So they've certainly played their hand very badly. I don't think they thought we were intelligent enough to work this stuff out. I also think that we were always going to come into a period of awakening. So I think, well, I know the Earth goes through 26,000 year cycles. They call them the yugas in India. We're coming into a light yuga. We're coming out of a satanic one into a light one. So, and some people would argue against that. I'm going with my gut feeling and my psychic ability and what I've been working with my entire life. I think that the family knew that this was coming, and so they've had plans for hundreds of years leading up to it. They just did a really shoddy job. And this is what happens, if you've got toddlers in charge because you've traumatized them through multiple generations. Yes, they might be control obsessed and inverted and dark in nature and selfish, but it doesn't mean they're going to do a good job, because they're coming from a childlike part. They're not logical.
Yeah. I think there's a component to this as well with the creativity that's like a kind of human phenomenon where we can think about the future and abstract ideas, and we have that creative spark. But once you, as you say, if you go through abuse or whatever, but also if you're dumbed down with the food and the water and everything, you're kind of living in those base level. Some people call it frequency and vibration, some people call it chakras, whatever it is. It's just a state of survival, and that ties into what Satanism is about the greed and obsession with like sex and drugs and all these things that are just me, more, rather than forward thinking and caring for the community and the earth and other people around you. Any thoughts on all of that?
Yeah. So one of the things that they do, and I'll try and use the right kind of language with this. So Freemasons believe if they do something to the back passage of a child before the age of 3, they can install energetically something outside of that child to control them. What it also does is it causes chronic reversed polarity where the chakras actually swap around. And so instead of having the driving aspect of a soul being the third eye chakra, the intuition, it's actually sex. And so they're driven by sex and base instinct. So what would normally be the crown chakra, which is your, desire to expand and see the future and those sorts of things, it ends up being base instinct, survival, destroy, survival of the fittest, which is where eugenics come in. So I actually, and I know this from other healers as well, you can have your chakras reversed in that way, and it causes all sorts of problems in the body. I had that issue. I was very unwell until I learned about what it was, and then by intent, I actually turned it back around. So because I was terribly violated in that area, like I said with the knife. So the installation of entities is a big part of it. And of course, these are things that psychology say you can't talk about this stuff. The men in white coats will come and take you away. But thankfully, a lot of people are waking up to this now. So attachments are a thing. It's terrifying to even consider, but it happens.
Yeah, and I mean, all these other cultures have always spoken about the good and the evil spirits or whatever, and it's just kind of Western society that hasn't and hid it for these specific reasons. And you talk to people that are recovering from these different addictions, and people will often say it's the devil on the shoulder and that type of thing. So I think if people start to think about these addictions or habits in their life they want to get rid of, as you're actually fighting like a micro possession, maybe, or is that kind of a fair term? Do you think?
It's so hilarious to me. So All the major religions believe in demons, all of them. And they know about, even the Buddhists talk about hungry ghosts. So that works out to be, the number of atheists on the planet works out to be like 600 million or something. It's not a huge number. It's just, compared to the rest of us, it's not a huge number. And yet everything is skewed towards atheism. These things don't exist. There's no otherworldly entities. We don't exist with any of those things. There's no God. There's no hell. It's all about survival of the fittest. It's just bizarre.
Yeah.
When you take into consideration things like sleep paralysis, in the vast majority of experiences of sleep paralysis, people report that there was something outside of their body that was ominous and menacing and was keeping them in a paralyzed state. That's the vast majority of people. Around 40% of people experience sleep paralysis. So, I mean, there's countless, depictions of people in those experiences in art and in poetry and all sorts of things like that for millennia. So, unfortunately, with the advent of psychiatry, a lot of this was repressed. And it's only been roughly about 100 years of this repression. In the 20s, everybody had a Ouija board. Not that I'm advocating for that's a pretty dangerous thing to muck around with, but everybody was opening up psychically in the 20s because of people like Edgar Cayce, although that was channeling, which is quite dangerous. It's come around again. 100 years later, people are waking up again. Oh my God, there are otherworldly entities, and we do exist in a multidimensional universe. We are multidimensional. So, and it's not crazy to talk about these things anymore.
And so when we spoke to Annika, and she said she'd seen and been at the blood drinking rituals and the worst of the worst, and how she'd seen like faces change in an almost demonic way. Were you at some of those worst of the worst rituals, and what was some of those weirdest things did you see similar or?
Okay, so there is a thing called clairaudience where you can hear otherworldly entities. So I used to be able to see and hear them. I was used as a child as a go-between in the rituals. So usually, well, some of them were underground in people's basements. Some were just in their houses. Some were, there was one in particular that was at like a resort type situation. And quite a few in the outdoors, again, in the crossing point of ley lines. So they'll get a really, really powerful space, which is called a portal or a vortex. That is a multidimensional space. And they'll do an unaliving in that space because it opens a portal. Because of their inversion, their satanic inversions and spell casting, they can open a doorway that they want to open instead of the doorway that would normally open for the child or animal or whatever it is that's been harmed, because it's usually angelic. So they invert, and then they, with that door open, because the torture has occurred and the shouting and the screaming has brought these entities to the dimensional doorway anyway, they'll open it and try to control these things that they call into the third dimension. So I was the go-between, and I had to communicate. So I could hear them, I could see them. There are no words to describe the feeling. There's an acrid, almost like a sulfur, but it would make the inside of my nose feel like it was burning, but I couldn't smell it. It's hard to explain. And the sound, these things were always furious at being called up. They didn't want to be in the third dimension. So I saw people harmed by these entities because the way that they did their spell casting wasn't enough, and they stuffed it up, and the individual who does the casting to bring the entity in is the one that gets attacked because there's some sort of tacit agreement, if they stuff it up. So the sound is like, and the only way I can describe it is nails down a chalkboard. It's a screeching noise. And I had to communicate. I shut down my clairaudience around about the age of 8, which I could have been unalived for because I wouldn't communicate anymore. Up until that time, I was treated not like royalty, but I was useful. So, but after that, I was just throwaway. But I somehow survived. These entities appear as mists where light just doesn't penetrate. It's the only way I can describe it. They will conjure up whatever image you would find most frightening. I used to see them as humanoid. They would sometimes display things like horns, but it was usually fairly amorphous. And yeah, if you look into the way that rituals are perpetrated, is probably the best way to describe the word. this perpetration, the individuals who actually do the conjuring, they have to go through a massive amount of rigmarole to be in a position where they can actually do the work. They have to fast. They can't be in physical relations with anybody for a long period of time. They have to eat only certain foods. They have to go through the purification process. When you work in the light with angelic beings, there's none of that. You have to run around, carrying on and doing all, list by step by step by step by step stuff, because we're supposed to naturally have communications with the angelic realms. That's natural and normal. But when you're doing stuff with the dark, it has to be very, very structured. And I often call these people idiots because I never saw any benefit to what they were doing. I don't know why they bothered. Sure, they would have power, but they would also have this monkey on their back, because once it's called in, if they're not going to let it go back, it's going to be really annoyed with them the whole time it's here. It's just weird.
Do you when you say you're not really sure like why they're wanting it, do you think at the higher levels they do get passed on like these different knowledge or
Well, they get okay, so the auditory channel, they can be spoon fed. So an angelic being will use light as visions to communicate, and that requires interpretation. And that's the work that I do now. And so I get things wrong sometimes because I've got to interpret what's being shown. And that means I'm learning my lessons and I'm not just being spoon-fed, which is part of the contract of being, in a physical dimension, doing the sort of work that I do. When people work with the dark, they get spoon-fed because they can communicate and use a language and just tell them exactly what's going to happen. So yes, those people can then have exactly the right numbers for the lotto. And I don't advocate that anybody do any of this to win money, because most of the people who win lots of money spend it very quickly and end up dead because there's no satisfaction in it. People think that, if they had all the money in the world, they could have a really happy time. It's actually the opposite. It's incredibly open to corruption. So yes, they do get benefits. They know exactly what's going to happen.
And have you seen people actually get like physically possessed, or are you aware of that stuff happening? Yeah.
Yeah. So the first image that I shared in the first presentation with you was of my father. Now, he had altar parts. He's from a multi-generational family, as I am. His grandfather was Grand President of the Grand Lodge, and he died when my father was 11. So God knows what happened there. So that image that I shared was actually what my siblings and I call Evil Max. That was his altar part. That was the one that abused us. Completely different to the other altar parts. And once you saw that look on his face, you ran, if you could. Yeah. And it was just immediate. We would swap.
And can that be like possession? Can that be a separate thing to these fractured parts of the mind that are like a good characteristic or a really evil mind split, but then is possession like a different layer again that just comes through as another personality? Or
I think there's lots of different kinds. So in that particular example, that there was definitely an entity involved.
Okay. Yeah.
But that doesn't absolve him from any guilt from what he did, nor does it anybody else. But these things are installed. So it was a form of possession.
So when we're, these evil spirits obviously want the things that happen at these rituals, and the worst of the worst and the negative energy, loosh, that type of thing. When we're going into healing and all that process, is it just, is it a matter of removing all these negative aspects and energies and addictions and all that from your life, as well as then the kind of psych component of healing? And how is that healing process for different people?
It comes down to one thing, and that's intent. Your intent is your most powerful tool. Anybody watching this, your intent is it. So I could have decided to be self-medicating, drinking myself into a stupor, sitting in the corner, sucking my thumb, feeling miserable, or I could choose to try and make some use of the information that I have and put this stuff out publicly and just throw caution to the wind, which is what I've done. And that is a choice. For those who've got, and I had an entity installed in me as well too, and they were removed through a healer. And it came out like a black taffy type energy from my solar plexus. So that's where it was installed. Once you have the intent to heal, things then heal. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. So I had the intent to heal, but I had to work out certain things. So I had chronic pain, and I was watching something that I just happened to be interested in watching. And then I learned about chronic reversed polarity. So my chakras are all around the wrong way. This also makes it easier for entities to work through people. When you talk about actually removing an entity from yourself, it's intent plus some sort of action that makes you feel like you're getting rid of it. And you have to be really quite strong in yourself in believing that you're going to do it. Some people need to go to a healer to do it, but anytime you go to a healer, you're just giving permission. A healer can't heal you. You have to heal yourself, but they'll help. So you can go off and see somebody that you have, you might have had a reference from about that they're really good and they know what they're doing. And then you go along, and because you have faith in that, faith healing, it will work for you. But there's all sorts of things you can use. Sound, 432 hertz will take most entities off people because they can't stand it. So if you play that sort of music around yourself all the time, play it for children when they're going to sleep at night, keep the dark things out of their rooms, because children are very interesting to these entities. That'll keep them away as well. 432 hertz is brilliant. 528 hertz. So there's things you can do. You can also, alcohol is like a red flag to a bull. So people who drink, they call it spirits for a reason. A lot of people know this now. This is why some religions don't touch it, because it damages the auric shield. It's the only way I can describe it. So there's a shield around the aura, which is the soul doesn't fit in the body. The soul houses the body in the aura and operates through the chakras and meridians. So the soul is like a puppet master with the body as the puppet. There is an outer shield, and that can break down with things like alcohol, with the, if you're taking drugs recreationally instead of to open up your mind on a regular basis, that can break down that shield. Eating the wrong kinds of foods, being very depressed. And I'm not saying that people are, choosing to be depressed, but, negative emotions will break down that shield. And so these entities then get in.
How do you view psychedelics? Because I've spoke to other MK Ultra survivors as well who kind of had some mixed thoughts on it. Again, it was similar to what you said about maybe intention and with set and setting and that. So yeah, a lot of these natural plant medicines, mushrooms, ayahuasca and the like. How do you view those types of things?
Well, if you look at the way things were naturally and normally when we lived in communities and we had shamans as the person who was the spiritual teacher in that community, who had psychic visions and who was adept in those areas, they didn't take it daily. They took it on occasion for knowledge and wisdom. And I think that in those circumstances, it's fine. It can be a little dangerous for some people who've gone through MK Ultra programming. Like I'm pretty sure one of the things that I was given as a child was mescaline, because I was speaking to a friend who knows about the sorts of plant substances that you've been talking about. And I had a full-bodied apparition, colour apparition vision in one of the rituals I was used in as a child, but I was given this liquid beforehand. So I knew I was drugged. It was just very weird because this entity was supposed to be a demon, but it wasn't scary. So it was obviously I was hallucinating, I would say, in that particular example, because it was these entities very rarely. I mean, that was the only time I ever saw anything in colour. Yeah. So if someone's been through those sorts of rituals and they've had experiences with those medicines, if they were to use those once they get out of the cult, it might be incredibly triggering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you said before about apparitions appearing as the thing that'll scare you most, we had Nathaniel Gillis on the show. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he said the exact same thing, and he's kind of does exorcisms and the full range, and he's kind of talking about this whole phenomenon for a lot of people, even the abduction phenomenon and stuff, how it's all kind of the same phenomenon. They'll just appear however they can to get that fear and that negative energy out of you.
Because it causes a shock. And that breaks down the outer aura, the shield, and they can get the energy from you. So these entities that exist, these dark entities that exist in the physical dimension, aren't supposed to be here. The inversion of the ley lines that's done through the family, the global cabal, is to make sure that normal transition after the physical body has died, the soul is then supposed to go to a dimension that their soul frequency is a match to. But that's been inverted, and that's why we've got so many attachments here. This is not normal. We're not supposed to have all these entities flying around harassing people. They can't exist in this dimension without food. They need our energy. Hence, the arenas and the loosh and all of that stuff is designed so that they can stay here. Because, like I said, they're very uncomfortable here unless they have the right kind of energy. They come in furious and they're dangerous. So if you are going to be predated on when you go into the hellish realms, because the hellish realms, you can die on a soul level in those realms. There's more powerful demonic entities that will hoover up the lesser entities. So the lesser entities is what we deal with mostly in the physical dimension. They just don't want to go where they're supposed to. And there's idiots here who want to make sure that they can stick around because they can get spoon-fed. It's just a ridiculous. It's almost like a premise for a stupid, really bad, C-grade movie. So I'm not sure if I answered the question there. I went on a bit of a tangent.
No, that's good. But then, I guess, again, if the opposite's true, is this where we hear people talking about, spirit guides or angels or whatever throughout history and this type of thing?
Wherever you've got the light, you've got the opposite, you've got the dark. We're in a multi-dimensional space. So, and again, your ley lines, earth energy lines, crossing point portals are where these entities interact with this physical dimension. So where they come in and out. And those earth energy lines are everywhere. They're like capillaries. Ley lines are controlled earth energy lines that go in straight lines. Earth energy lines up meander and they're serpentine. They go everywhere. So I've got 3 going through my house. And most people's houses have at least 1 going through. And so this is a multidimensional space where multidimensional entities can interact. Yeah.
Cool. Is there anything else you want to touch on that spiritual aspect before we might change topics a little bit?
People need to know how powerful they are. So number 1, if you want to be able to protect yourself and have a successful life without attachments, don't abuse your body, feed it well, keep away from fluoride. Don't have fluoride treatments. It destroys the pineal gland. It ruins your circadian rhythm. You won't sleep properly. It calcifies the pineal. So keep away from fluoride as much as possible and eat properly. Glyphosates or glyphosates, however it's pronounced, that eats away at the pineal gland. Unfortunately, a lot of what went in here, that can do it too. But you can cleanse that out of the body. So my suggestion is just to take really good care of yourself. If this sort of talk frightens you because maybe you didn't want to believe that these things exist, just take good care of yourself and you won't get the attacks. Because as long as the outer shield of your aura is intact, you'll be fine. And the way to heal that is to get out in nature. Anywhere where there's endemic forest, where they haven't bulldozed it all and put rows of trees in, where all the plants are growing in symbiosis, you'll get mycelium that releases negative ions, which is positively affecting, or get out near the ocean, large bodies of water, same thing, negative ions positively affecting will plug up the holes in the aura.
Awesome. And just that other general health advice, I guess that, I always talk about getting that good water filter to get out fluoride and glyphosate and all that. Sauna, fasting, eating good, healthy food, meditation, I assume you're a believer in. Is there anything else kind of add to that general list?
If you feel yourself getting down and depressed, do something about it. If you're doing a job that you cannot stand, that makes you miserable, throw caution to the wind and find something that does make you happy. Because working in those sorts of paradigms now is going to be more deleterious to people than if you were doing it 10 or 15 years ago. This new frequency that we're coming into, if you stick at something and work for the man instead of working for yourself or doing what makes your heart sing, it's going to make it that much worse.
Yeah. Do you feel like we're kind of heading in this bifurcation that, what you just said then really reminds me of what I've been talking about, that I feel if you're going to stay in the matrix and just put your head in the sand to all this stuff that's coming out, you're going to be stuck in that office, working with AI and artificial lights, probably doing more soul selling because you've got to stick with the mainstream agenda of whatever's going on, no matter what industry you're in, because they're desperately trying to maintain control, versus people that are opting out and going, nah, I'm going to go live in the country or start growing a bit of my own food or cut back a day a week to spend more time with my kids and get in nature. So do you kind of see like there will be a group of people that maybe do end up living in 15-minute smart cities and they just become almost like robotic, and maybe the transhumanism thing plays out a bit, and then we'll just have these people that are choosing the natural route for everything?
I do. But I know the cities will just shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink.
Yeah.
Because basically they're going to make it impossible for those people to produce children. So that's pretty obvious. That's where the agenda is going. So that it just won't, it will peter out.
Yeah, cool. So with the tunnels, you spoke about like the Telstra network tunnels and some water tunnels and stuff. Do you think that this is like a global thing, and there's the military deep underground base tunnels? Do you think there's tunnels here that are like ancient from past civilizations, or like what have you seen and heard? Yeah.
So I had some experiences with physically present otherworldly entities is the only way I can describe it. I'm not going to go too deeply into it. I did describe and talk about this a couple of times publicly, most recently at a couple of conferences in America in September. I do think that there are ancient tunnels also. And the more I learn about Tartaria, the more I realize that, this molten core planet probably isn't real. I think obviously there's some pretty amazing stuff happening in Antarctica because everybody's fighting over it. And, I think it's pretty obvious aliens have been here probably before we even got here. That's probably why we're here. So I do a prediction series, and I predicted we would have full-on disclosure of aliens in 2025. Wasn't quite what I was expecting. It was just, some talk in Congress. I was hoping for something a little bit more. I think it's probably coming pretty quickly. I think possibly something's going to come out of the ocean that people aren't expecting. But, there's obviously so much about this planet that we don't know.
Yeah.
So yes, I would say very likely.
Yeah, and the Tartaria stuff, the bells and the frequencies and the healing. You're obviously across that and agree that that was just another way to keep us in harmony with nature.
Yeah, and what did they do? They turned them into bullets for a friggin' war.
Yeah.
That's why I have so much hope, because once we get the bells back up into the towers in those controlled ley lines and change the frequency, everything goes back to where it's supposed to be, because they've already put everything in. All the piezoelectric structures are already there, holding it into a frequency that's anti-clockwise. We just change it back. So there's also sorts of different ways that we can do that. Collective consciousness can do it. If they put out a Hollywood movie talking about this, the collective consciousness would turn it around the other way, if anybody would watch Hollywood anymore anyway.
Yeah.
But that would happen immediately, I think. And that's where we would see the absolute annihilation of these controlled family members.
And obviously, like you've 5G towers, Wi-Fi, like all the constant different frequencies and radiation we're exposed to from electronic devices, all adds to that negative as well.
Yeah, well, that doesn't need to be the way that it is either. Just change the frequency of that also. And people go around with these tower busters as well. Orgone can be incredibly powerful and very, very effective. So, if you only need one tower buster for each tower, there's one person in each community who can go out and do that. It doesn't, it's not rocket science. And that's all we need, is just the knowledge of how to do it. And again, it's really the collective consciousness of going out and doing that. Enough bodies on the ground doing it makes the biggest difference.
Yeah.
And this is why Hollywood existed for so long, so that they could project what they wanted us to believe.
Yeah.
So at the moment, the projection is we're going into an AI nightmare. We're all going to be controlled and live in 15-minute cities. Well, they've stuffed it up. It would have happened already. It's not going to happen. So, I try my best to point that out to people, because it's very, very, very scary.
Yeah. With the Tartaria stuff and ancient history, do you have any thoughts on like resets and that type of thing?
Yeah. So it's pretty obvious. I mean, obviously, the New World Order was supposed to be a reset. I think these resets energetically occur, like I said, every 26,000 years or so. I think that they come in trying to control it. And they may have been successful. Obviously, they've wiped some of the history at certain times, but they haven't. This time around, it won't work. And I think the only reason for that is the frequency is different. So there was a gentleman called Rory Duff who sadly died recently, but he prophesied that in the end of 2024, the ley lines would come into this permanent harmony time. It's an extremely rare event. It pretty much never happens. And it could last for about 1,000 years. This is part of biblical prophecy. I don't have a great deal of confidence in the Bible because it's been inverted, but there are certain passages that I think, if you read between the lines, are actually telling us something. So this reset had to be monumental, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's not as big as they would have hoped it to be. So
Yeah.
And again, if it was in control, it was never going to really work out.
Yeah, I agree with you about religion. How I think a lot of these older texts have been rewritten and yeah, inverted and manipulated. But I think at the root of all of them is just a very similar message about the way to live life and be kind to other people. And it's a pretty, pretty similar message. And yeah, what do you think about that?
Oh, yeah, it's a cautionary tale, isn't it? I
Yeah,
was talking about this with a friend earlier. Fairy tales were told to children because the cautionary tale, some people are bad. Some people predate on children. But they stopped sort of showing that because apparently it was too dangerous and too scary for children. But there's the news and there's all these other scary things that are happening. It's a pretty basic thing. I think we come into this physical dimension to decide whether or not we're selfish or altruistic. It's pretty simple. And the chakras are representations of the different levels that you can go to. So if you choose to be selfish, you're going to end up in a dark realm. It's just the way it works. It's energetically, it makes perfect sense. I think the problem is that, like I said, the hellish realms are predatory. Entities don't want to exist there because they, and this also explains, some people don't get why certain despots will take out huge numbers of people. The whole point is they are trying to achieve a low enough density, powerful density, so that when they do go to one of those dimensions, if they end up in a hellish realm, they're at the top of the pack. So there are certain things you can do in the physical dimension. If you take out enough people, you can get immense power on the other side. So that's another reason why people do these crazy things. It doesn't make sense if you just look at it on a human level. Why would that person be, eugenics? They've got some crazy idea in their head that they're better than everybody else, possibly with all the trauma training with these family lines. But it makes more sense if you think about they're trying to gain power, ultimate power, on a soul level, which is what they're trying to do.
yeah. Yeah, wow. How do you see it playing out now? The Mulligan inquiry or the Woodrow Commission, and a lot of this stuff gets swept under the rug. We've obviously had that huge release of info in the files. Is it just going to be that slow process, public pressure to start charging these people and bigger names being held to account? We've already kind of seen a lot of these people can't walk down the street without being booed or kicked out of town. How do you see this playing out from now on as the Great Awakening continues and disclosure is everywhere?
I see it like the 100 monkey effect. Once it starts, it snowballs. I think it's just going to go worldwide exposure. It's not a trickle anymore. So I think some of the instances where we see people have passed away, I think they're probably just going off and disappearing somewhere. Either to one of the continents we're not allowed to know about, or perhaps there is some off-world places that they go. That there's plenty of habitable planets in our own Milky Way galaxy, and there's technology that could get people there. So they could be doing that. So unfortunately, I think some of them will get away with it. They'll probably just go off planet, or go, like I said, somewhere else. But I don't think that they can stop this at this point. I don't think it's possible. So with all of those Epstein files being released, I think all the blackmail that could be extracted from those particular files has been enacted, and that's why they're being released. And I just see it's just a knock-on effect, like a ripple. Yeah.
Phew. Anything else we haven't touched on today, Rachel, you think is really important for people at home? I mean, I think for me, one of the most important things you've said is just it's up to the individual to take that sovereignty and stop listening to that external authority, which is how we're programmed. And once we all start doing the right thing, raising our frequency, being healthy, whatever you want to call it, then it kind of naturally just spreads.
I think it's exactly what you've just said. Be the best example that you can possibly be. Not to get external gratification, but to feel like you're actually making a difference. So I think the time of just sitting back and watching other people do it has passed. It's time to step up, and don't live your life in fear of death. Don't wait for some horrible prognoses to enact your bucket list. Live your life like this is your bucket list. Live your life like that. Don't wait. Just do it. So I think that, and I see people doing that. I've predicted for a couple of years now. Get out of government positions. If you're in a government position, quickly get out. Find something that makes your heart sing and do that. because those government positions aren't going to exist for too much longer. And that's that full nanny state thing, isn't it? It's just, or you're on, if you're on benefits, and apologies to anybody who's struggling, but if you're in those situations, now is the time to find what makes your heart sing, live that life, throw caution to the wind again. It's hard, it's scary, but it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Rachel, that's been an amazing presentation and chat. I hope you guys have enjoyed both parts of that. I'll put all the links to follow Rachel's socials down below. Sign that petition as well if you like. Any final thoughts for people at home, Rachel?
Just thanks heaps for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I just hope people try to find something joyful every day to do. Keep your vibration up.
Awesome. That's been so good. I hope you guys have enjoyed that as much as I have, and we'll keep in touch and have you on again in future, Rachel. Cheers.
Oh, I'd love to, Alex. Thank you.
Cheers.